hardware store. The co-founder of Home Depot did his undergrad at Babson, his MBA at Babson. I've got the CEO of Zumba, Babson. Most importantly, the current finance minister of Bahrain is a Babson graduate. He did his BS in finance and investment, and in Bahrain, we have around about 15 graduates from Babson. The last things on the slide, if people know about accreditation, we are triple accredited in the US, and this we take very seriously because we don't compromise in the kind of education we dispense around the world. We won't cut corners. We'll tell you the way it is, and just to show you a little bit about what we do. So Babson College, just to give you the structure, the president is Dr. Kerry Healy. We have our chairperson, Marla Capozzi. As you can see, these are two women. Babson College is run mostly by women. I work in a department of 35 people. I'm one of 5 men. So wherever we go in the world, we empower women through entrepreneurship. Babson is the first institution in the US that's got an incubator only for women. Nowhere else in the States you'll find that. So we've got 3 different divisions. We've got our undergrad school, the grad school, and then executive education where I work. And I look after the Middle East, Africa, India for executive education in this region. But we also have what we call centers of excellence and institutes. Being in entrepreneurship for only 100 years, we've had time to do a lot of research, and we've got a lot of what we call centers of excellence and institute. For instance, you've got the Blank Center for Entrepreneurship. That's our incubator for our students. We've got a center for investments and finance. In fact, part of our endowment is managed by our own students. Not many places will do that. We've got a center for women entrepreneur leadership. Again, only place in the US is at Babson. Lewis Institute for Social Innovation. We embrace all the United Nations SDGs, so that's run from there. We've got a retail supply chain institute. We've got an institute for family entrepreneurship, Center for the Arts, and also we have a presence in Saudi Arabia at Mohammed bin Salman College. I'll just go very quickly. So our mission, basically, we want to educate entrepreneurial leaders who will create economic and social value everywhere. This is very important. Many people, when they think of entrepreneurship, you always think about profits. You always think about the economic aspect. We bring the social aspect as well into what we do. So our vision, basically, is to be known for entrepreneurial thought and action. This is basically our DNA. Many people say, why is Babson #1 in the world for entrepreneurship? Is because of that ETNA. We teach by action. We don't believe in, many people say we need a business plan. Great, but what do you do with a business plan? Who's got a business plan that's ready to implement? We believe in things like our growth plan, which is in one sheet. You've got your value prop, you've got your marketing message, you've got everything in it. You're ready to act always. And as you can see, we want to put the power of entrepreneurship as a force for economic and social value. So I work a lot within the GCC countries. We're helping Saudi Arabia, Kuwait towards their vision, 2035, 2030. They all want to embrace entrepreneurship as a vehicle to basically address their vision that's coming up very soon. So entrepreneurship at Babson, very quickly. All our students take entrepreneurship courses. 35% of our students come from family business. 45% of our alumni group own their own business. The next session that we'll be doing on youth entrepreneurship, I'm bringing 4 Babson alumni from Saudi and Bahrain. So they'll be talking about their experiences if you can stay after this session. We've only got 120 courses in entrepreneurship. This is very important. 100% of our entrepreneurship faculty. You might be a first-class honors from Cambridge, Harvard, you name it. If you cannot prove to us that you've had a business, you failed in a business, or you've got a consulting gig, he has entrepreneurial experience. You don't teach at Babson. We don't want theory people to come to teach. When you teach, you have a business, you can teach to the students. We do the GEM report. I don't know whether people have heard of the GEM report. This is basically a report where you've got at any one time 70 to 80 countries that send the data. So if you want to go and invest in a country, you will look at the economics intelligence unit to get the GDP, GNP of the country, and so on. The GEM report gives you the entrepreneurship health of the country. So we've got 10 different characteristics that we measure against. So let me go very quickly. So just some rankings and recognition that we have. We don't do these things. These are other people that do that for us. So Princeton Review, Financial Times. For 25 years in a row, Babson in the US is #1 school for entrepreneurship at an undergrad level. We are the #1 school in entrepreneurship at MBA. So these are the few things that we've been recognized for. So I won't go through all this. I think the most important thing now, I'm going to show you very quickly through some videos what we're doing from high school all the way to helping governments around the world achieve economic growth. Now, this presentation can go for 2 hours. I don't have the time, so I'm going to skip through a lot. So I won't go through this. Let's look at this. So maybe let's play that video first, and then I'll talk. Let's have a look at this.
There is no such a thing as entrepreneurship, not as a subject of study or business activity. New businesses are started, but there is no new ideas, no new models, so it never entered my mind to study business or study in the US. But one day my mom found out about a scholarship to Babson College in the internet. I didn't know anything about Babson, but 2 essays were required and I decided to try just to practice my English. Then an admission officer came to Belarus to interview me, and she must have liked me, because here I am. Coming to Babson, I had a culture shock, and I couldn't believe that during the first year, Babson will actually give you money to start your own business. That doesn't happen in Belarus. It was really hard to adapt, but I had peer mentors and professors who helped me, and I tried to be involved in as many things as I can. As I said, nothing new happens in Belarus in entrepreneurship, but in my short time in Babson, I believe that when I go back, I can change the society. I want to inspire high school students to study in America and help them to create opportunities for themselves and for others.
So I don't know whether you caught up. She said in the first year, she has to open a business. Babson is the only, I think, institution in the world that in your first year of study, we give seed money to the students. They have to open a real business. How many places do you see this? Why teach something if you can't prove what you're doing? And that's why Babson is always voted #1 in entrepreneurship. So these kids, basically, during the day, they are studying like anybody else. In the evening, they have to basically work on the business. So they will basically go through ideation, set up the business. Any profit that's made from the business, we give to charity. Any losses that's made, we embrace it. Because we embrace failure at Babson. Many jurisdictions around the world, they will see failure in entrepreneurship as a bad thing. We don't see it. You have to embrace failure in entrepreneurship, because if you look at Alibaba, everybody says, okay, how rich he is. But do you know how many times he failed before? So failure is one thing you have to embrace. You can't look back at it. So this young lady, she's graduated now. She's in the US. I mean, I wish I could bring her here. She could talk about her journey. So when our students finish their studies, they are picked up very easily by employers and so on, because they've got the skill set that's needed to basically adapt in a company, set up their business, and so on. So I'm going to zip very quickly, because we've got Randall, who's here from Wildcat Venture Partners, so I want to get into the topic of what we want to discuss today. I'll show you just 2 videos. I'm going to show you something on entrepreneurship that we do, and then I'm going to show you a video about ecosystem. And here there's a president of Colombia speaking about what Babson has done to help the ecosystem. We've been talking about ecosystem for the past 2 days, but let us show you what we talk about ecosystem. So I'm going to skip very quickly. So for entrepreneurship programs, so I've showed you what we do from a teaching perspective. This video is going to show you what we do for entrepreneurs. So we've got programs at Babson, no matter what stage you are, whether you're at ideation stage, startup stage, scale-up stage, exponential growth. We've got all sorts of programs that we can customize for a country, for an organization. And this one is basically the sort of open enrollment program that we run in the States. And I'd like you to see this video to understand a bit more from participants.
Nothing really happens until you act.
There should be a class taught like this in every single school throughout the world.
Babson has a reputation for excellence.
Entrepreneurial thought and action is really the genesis of everything that we're doing. How do I assemble my startup team? How do I pick co-founders? How do I make key hires? How to hire not only today, but for the future?
A propensity to act is what we're trying to teach. And listen, and learn, and analyze, and go act again.
Understanding how to make your idea better, how to model your idea to make sure it's scalable, how to reach customers, how to clearly articulate what your idea is. By the end of the week, you realize you can do it, you've been given the tools to be able to do it, and you know what your next steps are.
You take a group of motivated, enthusiastic people and you put them together in one room, and that just starts to brew. It's the sharing of ideas. It's the challenging of one another.
The community that's fostered throughout the week is why a residential program like this is so important.
The culture of Babson is really core of the human spirit, entrepreneurship, the desire to make the world a better place in your own unique way.
We have very high energy professors who condense semester-long classes into a few hours.
What I love about the faculty here is that they're not just academics. I mean, they are practitioners, they have experience in the field. It's a combination and a mix that makes it just incredibly valuable that you're not going to get any other way.
This is the top school in the world for what I want to do.
I came here to learn from the best people that I could.
This is a great boot camp for anyone who is very serious about starting a new venture, or they're working on an idea, or they're already in a venture that they're trying to grow. I mean, this is a really, really important program.
One of the biggest things that I've learned here at Babson is taking it from the ground and being able to build it up.
Intense.
Exciting.
Interactive.
Innovative.
Energizing.
Immersive.
Inspirational.
I'm comfortable that I've now been exposed to every element that I really need to think about, as I start this venture and grow it.
So that's just to give you a flavor of what we do within entrepreneurship. I'm going to skip now. We'll go to ecosystem. I just want to show you what we're doing with governments around the world. And this is a program we've done in Colombia. Anybody speak Spanish? Understand Spanish? It is in Spanish, but it's got English subtitles because the president of Colombia talks about the work that Babson has done. So I'm just going to show that to you in a minute. Oh, gosh. That's our model for ecosystem work. Maybe you've seen that model before. This is where we bring all the stakeholders together. Many places, they think if they do a boot camp, you can solve entrepreneurship issues. No, you have to look at the whole ecosystem. You need to bring the public sector, the private sector, the financial institution, the government, all to work together. And that's what we are doing in some parts of the world and even in the US. So I'm going to show you the last video, and that hopefully will give you an idea.
Manizales, la hermosa y señorial capital caldense, ha sido siempre modelo de emprendimiento. Por eso, ¿qué mejor ciudad que esta para iniciar un programa que apueste por el crecimiento empresarial y a través de este crecimiento, el fortalecimiento de una región que ha sido muy cercana a mi corazón, la región cafetera? Hoy quiero saludarlos por esta magnífica iniciativa que se ha denominado Manizales Más y que ahora se lanza a nivel nacional. Ustedes han concretado la mejor de las alianzas, la que reúne al sector privado, al sector público y a la academia para un gran propósito: crear empresas que a su vez generan trabajo y bienestar para todos los colombianos. Y lo han hecho además con la importante asesoría de expertos internacionales, como es el caso de la prestigiosa Babson College. Desde el gobierno hemos dicho siempre que la competitividad empieza en lo local, es como la política siempre es local. Y por eso valoramos esta iniciativa que puede traer desarrollo social y económico, no solo a Manizales, no solo a Caldas, sino al país entero. Programas como Manizales Más, que es un ejemplo a seguir por otras regiones, nos ayudan en la tarea de construcción de un país más justo, de un país más moderno, de un país más seguro, de un país en paz. Muchas felicitaciones y sigan adelante con ese mismo entusiasmo y con ese mismo coraje que tuvieron sus fundadores. Nada menos podemos esperar de esta capital a la que el gran poeta Guillermo Valencia describió con tan acertadas palabras. Esta ciudad es prodigio de trabajo, cuna de hidalguía, ejemplo de generaciones, blasón de la República, atalaya de porvenir, símbolo de progreso. Muchas gracias.
So hopefully, I know I've zipped through this very quickly for 100 years of history. I wanted to show you that, we have got solutions and programs. I always say for 99% of issues or problems that countries or regions have. And we do entrepreneurship of all kinds. Entrepreneurship is not just for profit making. We work with a lot of NGOs. We work with companies, because even companies put entrepreneurship within the corporates. It's called intrapreneurship. So we've got a variety of things that we do. So anyway, I'm going to stop here because we're going to get into the topic of today, which is the Traction Gap program. I'd like to welcome Randall Usery, who is a VP at Wildcat Ventures. Randall is also an adjunct professor at Babson. So we bring, I was telling you, people who work in real life as well. He teaches in our undergrad, postgrad programs. On top of that, he's a Babson alumni. He did his MBA at Babson. Randall, over to you.
I'm also an investor in Babson College students. One happens to be a MENA founder. We've been building an ed tech platform over the last 3 years. We're getting ready to launch it in North Africa here in the next 12 months, which is great. So I'm Randall Usery. As Vinod said, thanks. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship at Babson College. I'm a VP at Wildcat Venture Partners. I'm an investor. I live in Silicon Valley. I teach a class called Silicon Valley Tech Ventures, where every year I take a group of 6 to 7 groups of 4 to 5 students from incubation to launch of a company, with the idea of getting in front of VCs in Silicon Valley and thinking about how to receive investment and potentially go to market immediately. I'm going to share a little bit with you around this concept we have called the Traction Gap at Wildcat Venture Partners. Wildcat Venture Partners is an emerging B2B to B2C technology venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. The founders were responsible for some of the largest enterprise companies that if you were driving up and down in San Francisco, you would kind of see. One of the founders was an executive at Oracle. He was one of the first 100 employees. He left. He ended up going to Siebel, became one of the first 5 employees of Siebel, which was then bought for about $5 billion. Another founder built a software company called Agile Software. He ended up going from 0 to about $850 million in acquisition in about 7 years, which is pretty remarkable in San Francisco. And then another founder literally created 2 companies at the same time. One went to $10 billion in market cap, and one went to just north of, I think, about $800 million in acquisition. So in parallel. And the reason why I'm just kind of stating that, and it doesn't sound too humble, is what these guys had was a process by which to scale up companies. from go to product phase to go to market phase to go to scale phase, they understood the basic steps to make sure they were going to do it right the entire time. In essence, they codified how to scale success and risk failure, or de-risk failure, or mitigate it. That didn't come without a ton of learning. You know, this was 20, 25 years into their career. While we teach entrepreneurship at Babson, what's pretty interesting is if you look at the success rates of entrepreneurs, it's typically entrepreneurs who are 40 to 45 that are most successful. For 30 to about 40, you see it drop off. For 20 to 30, it's even lower, right? And partly it's because of experience, right? You know, you haven't done certain things. Having said that, I actually spend a lot of time with young entrepreneurs and CEOs and founders who want to change the world and who see the opportunity to actually build platforms that are going to completely disrupt anything that, you know, I would even understand, leveraging various technologies, et cetera. So what I want to share with you is just a little presentation. And at Wildcat, just so you know the kind of story behind the name, in the early 20th century, there was a group of wildcatters that would kind of scavenge around the US and try to figure out where to find oil. And when they were trying to find oil, they were often doing it in places where everyone was saying there wasn't oil. And then what they would end up doing is find a way to actually mine for that oil in that particular place, and they had enormous wealth, absolutely enormous wealth. Well, we see the same thing with data in the 21st century. What oil was to the 20th century, we think data is going to be to the 21st century. And so we call it the future of digital oil. We call it untapped value. As the 21st century, as we head into the remarkable digital transformation that we're getting ready to undertake, we think there's a moment globally for companies to rise and be the next players in the space. So, did I just hit this? Yeah, okay. So we all know healthcare, financial services, education, consumer enterprises, they're all being disrupted. Business is no longer driven by oil and manufacturing, it's driven by data and tech. And I'm seeing this here, right? Like, you know, I've been so inspired the last few days in Bahrain, particularly with the FinTech Bay, Startup Bahrain, a number of initiatives that are really playing to this right now, how to think about diversifying economies, how to think about becoming global players or regional players overnight. Data and tech is an easy way to do that. And the other thing I would say, you know, we think we live in the era of intelligence, where the only currency is going to be data. Now that's kind of a bold statement to say, but if you think about it, how we drive smart cars, or how if we're getting on the computer, it's funny how they when we're searching for something on some sort of search engine, how they know exactly what we want, right? Everything's being driven by data. For good or bad, we have a chance to make it good. But we call this data digital oil. And we think it's one of the most untapped opportunities of the 21st century. And we think it's going to drive the 21st century. And for me, and I spend a lot of time in emerging markets. I've spent quite a bit of time in LATAM and Sub-Saharan Africa, now the MENA region, helping kind of build companies out of the ground and think about how to scale globally. You know, I haven't seen opportunity like I've seen here in a very long time, and I travel a lot. So, you know, just in the conversations I've had over the past few days, my reading to date, the founders that I'm backing from this particular region, as well as in Sub-Saharan, you know, if you have the right capital, you have the right access to talent, which I think we do globally now because of the kind of global migration of talent, and the right formula, you know, every region has a moment. And they have a moment to shine, to offer their products to the world. And for me, that formula is super critical. Most people don't have it. So I'm not sure if anyone knows this, but over 80% of startups fail. It's actually 95% of startups fail. And on the B2C side, if you look to business consumer startups, it's less than a 1% chance that you're going to see a real ramp up and a rate of traction for a company. That's kind of scary statistics, right? And partly it's not because they didn't have access to capital. It's not because the team wasn't talented. It's oftentimes because they didn't have a formula, right? And if you want to build and operate the global technology companies of the future, you have to have a formula. And Babson, just to let you know, Phil is probably one of the best professors of innovation. He was actually one of my professors before he brought me on to Babson to actually teach. Thank you, Phil. What he taught me and what a number of other professors there is it's also not academic, right? At the end of the day, building a company, running a company, starting a new technology vertical, there's nothing academic about it. It's all about acting, right? And not getting too far ahead of yourself, but staying methodical throughout it. So, what we did was we ended up creating this concept called traversing the traction gap. The reason why we did this was because as we go and invest in the technology companies of the future and in the next few years, we just want to make sure we can ensure success. And for our hit rate, as I was saying, over 80% of startups fail, 95% of B2C startups fail. We have a 76% success rate, which is pretty remarkable, right? Now, we only have a portfolio of 25 companies as it stands right now. But as we continue to invest capital into companies, we want to make sure that success rate is stabilized around that 75% mark. We're not going to hit it every time, but we're going to give it a go, right? And part of it is because we follow a certain process. And one of the things that I would say, and this is why I'm so excited about emerging markets and less excited about the Silicon Valley, is everyone has a moment right now to kind of define what the future means, right? I mean, all the legacy systems that we're stuck with in the US, particularly in the Valley, are really hindering us from actually going out and innovating new products and services. We're thinking about 300 million people versus 7 billion people. It doesn't actually always make sense. Now, you'll see certain companies, the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world, the Snapchats of the world, the Ubers of the world, that do it pretty well. But then you'll also see this beautiful thing of Kareem coming up out of nowhere in many respects, and getting attention, and then all of a sudden, Uber has to come and acquire them, right? At some point, it's going to be Kareem acquiring Uber, and that's going to be in the very near future, which I hope. It won't be Kareem, but you get it. So, what does this formula look like? How do we do this? Well, we just launched this book in February. Luckily, it's doing pretty well on Amazon. So if you search it on Amazon, it's actually it's in the #1 business spot right now. Pretty excited. And both Phil and I informed some of this. This particular book is different from most business books, and we live it. It's much of a religion for us in terms of how we build companies. It's less academic and just more formula. So I walk through where I am in my company, I see what inflection point I'm at, and I understand every single thing I'm supposed to be thinking about at that moment, whether it's teams, systems, products, revenue, you name it. But the biggest piece is does anyone in here know why most startups fail? Anyone? Just a couple guesses. No customers. That's exactly why we built this book. That's exactly right. So we spend so much time focused on go-to-product phase and go-to-scale phase, we forget about the go-to-market phase, basic sales. how do you engineer markets? How do you engineer revenue? So what we've focused on is thinking about that we call it the valley of death, right? Where I go and launch a product, and magically, a miracle occurs. And this is, and I don't know if you can read this, but I think you should be more explicit here in step 2. So I have this beautiful algorithm, right? And then all of a sudden, on the other side, this end state is going to look like this. But somewhere in the middle, I just kind of think there's going to be a miracle that I'm going to produce sales, right? Or I'm going to engineer a new market, or magically I'm going to leave Bahrain and I'm going to launch in the U.S., or I'm going to leave the U.S. and I'm going to launch in Bahrain. It just doesn't work that way, right? Uber tried that. They tried to come into the region. Where did they fail? They didn't understand the culture. They didn't understand contextual nuance. And they didn't think about evolving their technology or their go-to-market plan to actually think about cultural nuance. But what they thought, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world, and we have these conversations all the time in Silicon Valley, is that we're just like, oh, if I build it for 10 people here, I can build it for globally. It just doesn't work that right way. But if they would have thought about the go-to-market phase prior to that, they probably would have built the experience a little bit different, right? And so as they're moving up to scale, their actually launch strategies would have been quite different. And we've seen companies do this all over the world. So the traction gap, again, we focus right in this middle phase. There's the go-to-product phase, there's the traction gap, and then there's the go-to-scale phase. So this is one of the things I will say I hate about business school, or acronyms, right? But at the same time, for us, you'll see a bunch of acronyms here: MVC, IPR, MVP, MVR. For us, what it does is it establishes naming conventions across our portfolio of companies. So and outside of Wildcat, I have a number of companies I'm invested in. When I talk to a CEO or I talk to a founder, they tell me exactly what inflection point they're in based on one of these acronyms, right? And MVC is minimum viable category. They tell me exactly where they are in the checklist at that particular inflection point. And then we have a real conversation about how can we help you? How can we evolve this? What do we need to do to get to the next phase? And it's incredibly critical from our perspective. So one of the things this book does, which I think is super important for companies too, and anyone thinking about launching a company here or ever in your life, is Me Too products are great, but if you can go and design your own category, if you can just differentiate yourself just a little bit, design your own story, and get it out there, you will take market profits overnight. And I don't say market share, because I don't really care about market share. I care about the profits of a vertical. And a lot of companies think about, like, oh, I just want to go take market share. And what ends up happening is oftentimes you're commodifying yourself. You're going and you're competing with a number of groups of companies. You're not thinking about, how do I be the most profitable company in this particular vertical? Because I'll tell you, I would much rather have a $100 million company with 60% net profit than a $1 billion company with 1% of net profit, right? Like, it just, it doesn't work for me. We think about this quite a bit, and for us, it's when we're going through the process, if we're at an initial product release, which is this first phase of go-to-market, and we haven't actually designed the category, if we haven't actually thought about how we're going to differentiate ourselves, we're probably going to fail at the launch. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to nail it when we actually think about building that category, but at least when we get to initial product release, we're going to know that we have a greater chance of success and a greater chance of learning to iterate faster before we get to what is called minimum viable product. And minimum viable product for us, I mean, everyone kind of knows this, but for us, it's when we start the revenue ticker. And the revenue ticker could be a year out, it could be 2 years out, depending on if you're building a platform technology. It took us, we have a fintech company And we just launched in April 2017 after beta testing it for a number of years, but it took us 9 years to build the technology. 9 years to build the technology, about $25 million to go and launch in sub-Saharan and Asia, and now in this region. And I can tell you, like, as you're moving through that process, you know, and you're building that product, everyone's freaked out, right? They're like, when are you going to get to market? When are you going to get to market? When are you going to launch this thing? You know, there's so much risk, blah, blah, blah. How do we know if it's going to work? Well, what we were thinking is Google had kind of democratized advertising. What if we could go and democratize financial service innovation for this particular fintech company? So we knew it was a big play. We were thinking about a larger end state of what it would look like if we got to scale. But along the way, we were just like, let's just go design a whole new category. This doesn't exist in the world. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But at least along the way, we'll make sure that we're at least checking off the boxes. So when we get to MVP, and I'll get through this really fast after this, at MVP from MVR, it's probably the most critical. And MVR is repeatability. And I'll just share a quick story here. So oftentimes when a CEO launches a tech company, they're like, we need to hire a head of sales, right? We need to get out there and just scale this thing overnight. And our philosophy is we want you to have 10 to 20 customers, and we want that CEO, we want the head of product, we want the entire executive team actually in that sales meeting, because every single sales meeting in the first 10 to 15 to 20 customers is incredibly important to understanding how you're going to sell that at scale, because you learn quite a bit. You know, I think the customer wants this, you know, a set of benefits when really it's actually this value proposition over there. So during that learning, you start to think about, okay, well, here's some repeatable kind of moments that we can actually share that when we bring on a sales team, we're actually going to be able to scale this, right? And we can generate marketing. And by the way, like every single industry, like the cost of acquisition of customers is what kills companies, right? It costs a ton of money to acquire a customer. So from MVR to after I gain repeatability, I have 10 clients, 10 customers, 15 customers. Then I think about how am I going to scale that, and who are the key hires that I'm going to bring on that are going to allow me to scale this. And we'll walk into this a little bit more. So no different from many other kind of business consulting, business management thinking. We look in 4 kind of key architectures: product, revenue, team, and systems. At each of those stages we were just talking about, this fluxes, right? This fluctuates quite a bit. And at the beginning in that go-to-product phase, 80% of my efforts in my team is about building a product. But when I go to market, if 80% of my efforts is about product, I'm probably going to fail. So this is the point where we start thinking about, do we need new systems? Do we need new thinking around teams? Are we going to, do we have the right business model in play? And hopefully you're thinking about that long before. For us, for a technology, and this is particularly related to enterprise technology, and don't get caught up, like this go-to-product phase where it says 1 year from idea to IPR. You know, again, that was 9 years for one of our companies, or for one of my companies. That is quite different. It was 3 years for the ed tech company too. But as soon as we go to market, this is when it's super critical, right? So in the first year and a half, getting from IPR to MVR, I know exactly how much revenue that we need to hit, right? I think about it in terms of if it's a subscription service, I need to hit 1 million of ARR in 1.5 years, right? So from MVP to MVR, I'm thinking about, or in the first year, I'm thinking about doing 1 million of ARR. And it kind of shows right here. So MVP to year 1, I'm doing 1 million of ARR, which is annual recurring revenue. So if I'm doing $100,000 of revenue in month 12, it's 1.2 million. And then I get to another half a year, I should be able to double that. And then from there, go to triple it. So we call it D2 D2, T3, double twice, triple three times. And this is a formula for technology companies. So the top quartile growth technology companies in the world have all followed this formula. And this is what it looks like. It's that hockey stick up and to the right. This is everyone's dream. This isn't real. But for the top quartile companies, this is real. And primarily because they have followed a process. But you can kind of see, right? Like, it doesn't scale that fast. Right? A company doing 3 to 4 million in ARR, particularly like thinking about like a Google or someone like that doing that amount of money in the first few years, because we know them as this multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. Like, you think it doesn't take that long, but someone like Uber, I mean, it was founded in 2007. Everyone thinks it's still a startup. What Kareem did, which was amazing, in 7 years, they went from 0 to 3.1 billion in acquisition. Like, that is unheard of, and that's one of the best case studies that we need to do really fast, and understand what they did so others can repeat it. So as we go from 1 to 3 to 10, you can see 10 to 25 to 50. It's at the 50 million rate for us that we start to see liquidity, in the sense of potential IPO, initial public offering on some sort of exchange, et cetera. So, we follow a particular formula. We're investors. We want to think about liquidity exits. We also want to think about multiples. So if anyone is considering investing in technology, remember here's a perfect example. How many people have heard of Workday? You have? Oh, that's great. Awesome, one person. How many people have heard of Airbnb? Yeah? So can anyone tell me, for a single dollar that I invested in Airbnb, and they're both similar, one's about 35 billion, one's about 42 billion in market cap, can anybody tell me how much money or how many dollars I made for that $1 in Airbnb? What was the multiple? Yeah, well, just over time, like to liquidity, like if I invested early $1, what do you think?
So I think they went, if I remember correctly, they're asking for 50,000 for 15%. Now you do the math, is like one of the most, like maybe 10, 15,000 times.
No, well, the actual multiple for investors, if you look at the actual capital that's been invested in Airbnb, right? And yes, that would have been very nice. I don't think you got it. That's rare. But if you look at the multiple on investments in B2C, for Airbnb, it was just around 7 times multiple. For Workday, same type of market cap, north of 58. So where do you want to invest your money, right? Like, and part of it is when we get infatuated with consumer tech companies, versus getting infatuated with the companies that may be solving other problems on the back end, right? Like the B2B enterprise companies, and they have greater multiples. And so when you look at this is Oracle, NetSuite. You may have heard of some of these, the kind of SAP companies of the world. These guys all followed that same exact kind of process. And when I say they followed the traction gap process, when we were creating this book, those were all of our kind of team members at Wildcat for a very long time. So we were all trying to figure out, like, why were all these companies successful? Like, what were the best practices that we were bringing to the table, or that we were sharing at that moment, that all of these companies seemed to have the same trajectory? You have a question? Oh. Sorry. So I can send this out to you. This is just a one-sheeter. Obviously, it's very hard to read up here. The big thing I think to think about here is the epic startup failure rates without a formula. This is why we built it. We were just so tired of failing. And I've had a few companies not do do so well because I didn't follow the formula. I got drawn in emotionally, and I was so excited and inspired by my own dumb idea that I continued to try to push through and push through and push through. Incredibly inefficient with capital, didn't bring on the right team at the right time, etc. Didn't have the right systems in place, and really all I really needed to do was read a book, have a couple of individuals that have done this before, and go through a formula. And I just didn't do it. And now I will never do that again. I'd never, how many of you are entrepreneurs? Do you think it's easy? You find it easy? No, it's so hard. It's so inspiring and it's so difficult at the same time. But what I've found is it's gotten easier as I've gotten older because I've been able to learn, right? And for me, and we happen to teach students every day. I would rather them not make our mistakes. And so as I think about building out new technology ecosystems, and I think about creating accelerator programs all over the world, whatever it is we're working on, be it a CPG company, not even a technology company, we should just institute a formula. We should understand how we're going to go to market, and we should think about the end state and engineer backwards. Because if we're just saying, oh, we have this big idea, we're going to go solve this problem, we think we have the solution, more than likely we haven't done enough due diligence. It's okay to move slow, to go fast. It's okay to take a break and say, are we doing this right? And so for us, that's kind of what we build, is pretty much an assessment checklist and a formula for success. And hopefully, we'll see how it plays out in the future. But I think, in general, if you're not asking yourself what your formula is, if you're not attending to metrics and milestones, we have an issue. As it is for tech is very, 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 very difficult in the sense of it's highly competitive. The big deal is you're competing for engineers. Too, in the 21st century. So how am I thinking about the long-term play of actually creating engineer ecosystems wherever I'm building technology platforms or companies? Super critical. Is that good? Does anyone have any questions about yeah, go ahead. I think it's not working.
Testing. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Dwayne Rollins from C-Spot from the U.S. I wanted to ask a little bit about the model for the traction gap, in that take a process like agile software development, in that it works really well for tech companies, but not so well for other types of enterprises. Is the traction gap something that applies to other ventures that aren't tech?
It does. I actually have a few CPG companies, and we leverage the same exact process. What we change is the kind of revenue metrics, but we still stick to the same process in the sense of, can we go and design a new category? When we launch IPR, we're not going to go hire a really big sales team. We're going to go find out how it's selling in the market. We're going to be on the ground activating it. When we get to when we get to MVP, which is when we really think we're going to drive revenue, we have a little bit different revenue target. We're not looking necessarily at ARR all the time, but it depends on the industry. If you were to Bill just joined us, but if you were to look at life sciences, right, and you were building a biotech company, the actual 10 years it takes to invest in just to get to market to understand whether or not you're going to pass phase 3 clinical is quite different, right? But the actual questions you're going to ask yourself are the same along the way, right? So yes, it does work across industries. Yeah. And if you want to chat afterwards, we can talk about it more. Yeah, go ahead.
It's Mohammed from Mala'ab from Bahrain. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. or two, basically. Can we get this presentation first? And the second one, what kind of books do you recommend, like, for us to get over what you just explained?
Yeah, so...
I just came, so I did not catch up everything.
Oh, yeah. So there's a book that we have called Traversing the Traction Gap. But this is part of a trilogy for me. And I'm understandably that I'm one part academic, right? Like, I mean, not as academic as Phil, which kills him sometimes, but I'm 3 parts action, 1 part academic. There's a book prior to this called Play Bigger. It's by Chris Lockhead. That's worth reading, and it's about category design. It's pretty remarkable. One of the best books I've read in business, and I'm a prolific reader of business books. The other book that I would think about reading is Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. So on the go to product phase, Play Bigger really, Play Bigger makes you think about how am I going to design for the market, and how am I going to be my different or differentiate myself, right? This really focuses on go-to-market and working backwards so that you can engineer success to get to scale. And then Jeffrey Moore, who is also a partner of ours at Wildcat, and really known, I would say, business leader for most business schools, has a book called Crossing the Chasm, and that's for go to scale. I can share with you, we can talk afterwards, and I'll send you some stuff, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Juliana from Endeavor, Argentina, and there we are working on some kind of entrepreneurship programs to teach people how to entrepreneur, how to set a company. And my question is, taking into account your experience as a student and as entrepreneur, which is the best formula or the ideal formula that you recommend us to offer value to the person that is not aligned to this ecosystem?
Yeah. So
approach.
What's the best approach? Yeah. It's a great question. So how do I teach people this process in many respects and inform them of what they could be doing better? Particularly in big companies, or it doesn't matter, just in general. Yeah, for me, I think if there's accelerator programs in the area or education programs that actually walk people through what it means to be an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurship is, it's 1 part action, but it's also 1 part mindset. Oftentimes in emerging markets, in rural markets in the U.S., outside of the big cities, you have to change the mindset quite a bit to get people associated or comfortable with, let's call it risk, right? To get comfortable with something they didn't know. So if you can, in essence, create a support network and have people come together and then do workshops, etc., and just share knowledge. Typically, it starts there's a couple people that get really inspired, and then they become the influencers in that particular ecosystem or region. If I think about Startup Bahrain here, which I absolutely love, they're kind of sitting at the center of this ecosystem, pulling together investors, pulling together government, pulling together entrepreneurs, you name it, to, in essence, accelerate this sort of thinking, right? Because what I would say is, when I go into a new ecosystem, investors don't oftentimes know how to even talk to entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs don't know how to talk to investors. Government doesn't really know what to deal with. They just know they have certain regulations that they're attending to, but they want to become someone new, right? Or the local region wants to become someone new. So it's kind of coming together and getting people in and then exposing them to thought leadership, right? It's been done before, like this, even though, we wrote a book around it and it codified years and years of experience, it's been happening for a very long time. There's been successful companies for
we could get Professor Phil to give you a different answer.
Yeah.
Perspective on your question. Phil.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question that you've asked, and I think it highlights the importance of mentoring for all of us. I saw a lot of hands go up when Randall asked who is working with startups or who calls himself an entrepreneur. And this is a difficult business. There's a lot of things that are not explicit, a lot of rules that you only learn through practice. And as a result, we make lots of mistakes throughout the process. And if you can find a mentor or people who can give you advice, I think that can shortcut some of those mistakes and help you become more confident in your ideas and your ability to launch and grow the businesses. And so to Randall's answer, I would also add, find mentors in your area. And if you can't, if they're not visible to you, then take the initiative to create these networks, local clubs, meetups. Come to conferences like this to find other like-minded individuals that you can build those relationships.
And, yeah, there's not a thing I do that I don't really talk to you about, right? And Phil's been a mentor for a very long time, but I just want to introduce Bill Ericsson too. He's another mentor. And this is a perfect example. Like, I was interested in getting into biotech. I've never been in biotech. It's always been a like vision of mine to actually explore it. And I sat with him the other night here at the hotel, and within an hour's time, I gained so much information of what it means to scale up a biotech company, how I should be, what questions I should be asking when I'm getting on the phone with this individual I'm thinking about working with on it. And it's you know, when I got on the phone, I sounded very smart. Maybe the depth wasn't there, but it created a different conversation, right? So Bill Ericsson, he's the founding partner of Wildcat Ventures. Wildcat Venture Partners. I already talked about you a little bit. He's been responsible for building some of the iconic Silicon Valley life science or tech companies. Him and his partners have done pretty remarkable things. So in the last, let's call it the last 10 to 15 years, they've been responsible for 13 over $1 billion in market cap companies, what we would call unicorns in many respects. And partly the reason why I'm sitting up here is because I wanted to work with the best, you know, and I'm excited to, maybe you can introduce a little bit about your background.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Bill Ericsson, and I'm a founding partner of Wildcat Venture Partners. And we work with early stage startups, and really to answer some of the questions that you asked, which is how do you learn your way along the journey if you don't necessarily start within kind of the group of people who are working in the domain. And one of the things that I've always found highly successful is people who come outside of the domain and see a problem that people within the area don't really see and don't really understand. I think there's a lot of value in being naive and asking questions that someone within the industry won't ask. By the same token, then you have to make yourself a domain expert. And I think what everybody here has been talking about is, think of yourself when you're entering an area, how do I become a domain expert? Well, you do it through mentorship, through meeting with a lot of people who know the area and category well. Talk to customers. Talk to people who actually have the problem you perceive. They'll be happy to tell you about their problems, about what they're trying to solve. And just set out to learn as much about the domain and really become an expert, become the leading expert in the area that you choose to go into, but you're always going to carry with you an outsider's view, and that I think is where a lot of great innovation happens. So that would be my response to your question.
And part of it too, just when you're thinking about working with certain individuals, is understand their strengths and empower them with those strengths. And oftentimes, when, particularly as an entrepreneur, you get beat up, or if you're thinking about pursuing something, you don't believe you can do it. But you have particular strengths, and so if you can capture what those strengths are and tell them that they have it, and continue to empower them and say, yeah, run with it, run with it, run with it, then when you introduce new concepts, they're going to be more willing to take on those, or say, hey, you can go and work on this. Right? Here's your weakness as well.
So what I'd like to do now is take just a few minutes and ask a few questions of Bill and Randall, and then we'll come back to the audience for a few more questions before we wrap up. And I wanted to ask Bill this question. You've been in Silicon Valley for a number of years. You've been in the venture business. You've seen hundreds, probably thousands of different business ideas come across your desk. What are some characteristics of businesses that you're naturally drawn to, that are fundable, that our audience can learn from to help them develop and grow businesses that will grow and scale?
Well, often the things that you're most attracted to are not fundable, so I'll start with that caveat. But everybody has a different perspective as an investor. And for me personally, I want boldness. I want somebody to come in and say they can do something that is difficult, but if you attain it, will make us a big difference in the world. And so I have personally tended to invest in things that were maybe a little bit too hard, whether they were technically too hard to build, or whether they required almost superhuman effort to accomplish. Some of those fail, but the ones that succeed really do change the world, and so I tend to look for things that maybe push a little bit too far on the envelope. So that's that boldness and that sense of destiny that you're trying to change the world. That's the first thing I look for, and that's probably the key thing I personally look for. Other people who are more specific domain experts in a category and can be very focused on a particular problem that they've been looking to solve for years, and that's what will be attractive to them. I tend to believe that there are no technical problems remaining that can't be solved. There was a time in Silicon Valley 40 or 50 years ago when semiconductors were being developed, when the first computation platforms were being developed, where technical challenges were really the biggest risks of business. I don't believe there's any technical risk remaining in technology businesses, strangely enough. So I look for the people and the biggest possible problem they can solve. And 100% of the time my companies have figured out the technology, even in life sciences, biotech, where I have also invested.
Randall, brief answer from you?
What's that?
A brief answer from you?
I would just agree with that. Don't worry about the technology, worry about the problem you're solving, worry about the market opportunity, thinking about how you're going to engineer that solution or engineer that market for that particular solution. And Bill just said it well, right? Like there were real technical issues that had to be solved over the last 30 to 40 years. And if you're not worried about technical problems, for me, that means no matter where I have access to power, where I have access to talent, and I have access to capital, I can win, right? Innovation doesn't have to necessarily just come out of X pocket, particular places in Europe, in the US, MENA, et cetera. It can come from anywhere. And you can build right now a technology company out of the ground from anywhere. And if you're solving a local problem regionally, and maps to a particular demographic that's at a certain inflection point of growth in that particular society, you can go take that to other demographics similar to that all over the world. So don't let region ever be a limiter. Don't let technology ever be a limiter. if you're interested in building the platform companies or the global companies of the future, yeah, they can come from anywhere. That's what I really love about it right now. I mean, personally, yeah, and change the world. I mean, I echo Bill's sentiment on that. I don't really take part in companies that can't change the world.
So Bill, at the beginning of our presentation, we talked about this concept of digital oil as a new way of thinking about business opportunities. And in previous conversations, you've mentioned that entrepreneurs and their businesses have now a chance to skip generations of technology. And I wonder if you can just unpack that for the audience in a way that they might be able to tap into new opportunities, especially in this part of the world.
You know, one of the interesting things about the United States or Europe is that we contend with a challenge of having a lot of legacy infrastructure and a lot of legacy business processes. We call that whole concept trapped value, because legacy processes trap people or companies in ways of doing things that don't make sense anymore, but because you've got the legacy infrastructure to deal with, it's very difficult to move away from. And so I think one of the opportunities for emerging markets or places, any place that doesn't have that legacy infrastructure, is to just ignore the historical ways of doing things and do it and just jump it. And we've seen that obviously with mobility and telecoms throughout the world. One of my favorite examples, though, is healthcare, where I believe there's just an enormous opportunity to generation skip the way that healthcare is delivered and using digital health platforms to do that. I have a company called HealthTap, which is a US-based company, but probably 60 to 70% of its customers come from outside the United States. And what they've simply done is taken the process of healthcare from first discussion with a physician, through diagnosis, through treatment, and they can do 80% of all healthcare interventions on a digital platform. Of course you can. Healthcare is an information system. It's a business process. Everywhere in the world, we go through the same basic process. In the United States, we do it today in a very physical way. You go to your doctor's office, then you go get your blood drawn someplace else, and then you go back to your doctor's office, and then you might go to the hospital to get to have an interaction with another doctor. All of those early steps you can do online. If I were starting a company today, I would start a company to do 100% online health. You can't do cancer online. If you get in a car accident, you can't do that online. Obviously, there's categories that don't. But day-to-day healthcare and wellness and interacting with your physician, you can do it all online. And then it gets really interesting. So this company that I'm involved with has now answered 8 billion healthcare questions. And it's not the company answering, it's physicians who are part of their network. They have 100,000 physicians. They've answered 8 billion questions. So using machine learning, artificial intelligence, they can now use their computational platform as a triage system. So when I go, I can ask a question, and they'll immediately point me to the right physician. I don't have to go through the process of even finding the right kind of physician. And they are as accurate as a human physician. They've actually taken the board certificate, the computer has taken the board certification in the United States and scores as well as a human physician does. Because again, it's just pattern matching and triaging. So that's an example where you can generation skip 100 years of medical practice in the United States, for example, and do it virtually. So that's an example, Phil.
Wonderful. And my final question for you is, we've talked about the traction gap framework and the different inflection points along the life cycle of a business venture as it starts and then moves towards scaling and growth. for you personally as an investor working with Bruce and at Wildcat Venture Partners, if you can leave the audience with one piece of advice of how to use the ideas of the traction gap formula to increase their likelihood of success.
Yeah, the way I would use them is to look at it as a framework for a journey through building a company. And I'd get very familiar with the concepts and then try to apply them. Look very carefully at what you're building, and at each stage, what is resonating. Because what's in the traction gap is, I don't know, 50 years of journeys that we've all been on. I've been involved in 100 companies. And over time, very consistent patterns emerge. Every company's different, but every company's the same in a sense. And what I would try to do is familiarize yourself with the concepts, and then as you're on your journey, pattern match against them. I personally think the most valuable piece in there for entrepreneurs, the mistake we see, is in a world where there's a lot of capital available. There's a lot of capital for startups. It may not seem like it all the time, but we're in a fairly remarkable period of history, is that companies spend too much money on selling and marketing before they've really gotten that product customer fit. That is where most companies make the mistake. It's not obvious, it's actually quite subtle, and then they get themselves in trouble, out over their skis, and it's very hard to turn the ship around. So I would use it generally as a framework. I'd look at every piece of the journey. I'd compare it to my journey because everybody's journey is different. But try to draw the lessons at each stage and compare them to what you're doing.
So why don't we have a final set of questions from the audience. If you have a question you'd like to ask Bill or Randall or myself, now would be a good time to do it before we wrap this session to a close.
Hello, I'm Knez from Bermuda. As the market has developed and you've had these big super companies and a lot of consolidation, it's drawn the attention of regulators with GDPR, and in the US they may be looking at additional regulation. Do you think that could impede future growth or the next big company, or things that we should need to consider when we're looking at what we're going into, or what sectors to avoid, what sectors to go into?
You want to go? You can go ahead. I have an opinion. Yeah, Bill has an opinion.
Yeah, so I'll take a crack at that. I think I'm not generally a huge fan of regulation because regulation tends to inadvertently hurt startups. Regulation is sort of like the elephant that's trying to deal with another elephant, a big company, but it tramples on the startups. And so typically my answer would be that for most startups, unless they're doing something wrong, you don't want to be in a regulatory framework. It costs more, it's harder to scale, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that what's gone on with technology, with a handful of very large companies dominating their markets, is not great for startups, because it makes it more difficult to build a startup with that weight of competition. So I think that it's not a negative in this particular instance, that some of the big technology companies should be under some sort of regulatory regime. And I think it's good for startups because it creates opportunities for startups to solve problems that they may not be allowed to go after, or that they stay away from because they, they're scared of more regulations. So I think there's a balance at all times. I think that the net of it is, if you think from an innovation standpoint, a startup that starts in a regulatory framework is going to understand that framework from the get-go. A big company that has regulation applied to it is going to have to figure it out because they've got a business. And so I think the advantage of the startup is always nimbleness. It's always being able to move faster, make decisions more quickly, being able to outmaneuver the big organization. And so I think it actually creates an opportunity for startups rather than a negative, if it's done properly. If the regulation is too broad and covers too much of the waterfront, it can be worrisome. But in general, I don't think in this case it's a negative.
You said you were from Bermuda? Yeah, I've done quite a bit of work in the Caribbean, and particularly in Jamaica and the Bahamas. And where I found regulation to be really, really helpful was particularly if there's a new economy that they were attempting to diversify into, let's call it the service sector or the BPO sector, where if you were starting a company, particularly, and the same thing's happening with the Central Bank of Bahrain right now, right, of thinking about how to collaborate with entrepreneurs and investors around fintech, right? If you're starting a new company, your regulators are also your best, or a new industry in many respects. Your regulators can be your best friends. They can be your partners. They can help from a startup ecosystem perspective, help set up the right opportunity for success, even become the investors behind that success, et cetera. And particularly in smaller countries, it's less in the US, that's where I see the moment you can really scale fast, right? You can grow very fast. And then, oh, by the way, from a regional perspective, if I look at the regional ecosystem, every prime minister is talking, or head of state is talking to each other, right? And they all are somewhat competing, but they're all in it together. And then they're sharing best practices, and then what you're doing is kind of a leapfrog approach. We call it island to island, right? Like you're doing a leapfrog approach, and then you're entering into a larger market because you already have scale. So there's some real opportunity with regulators as well, and regulation.
We'll take one more question.
Hi, my name is Mirza. I'm from Bahrain. You guys have been here for a few days now and you understand the region a bit. So my question is, what do you think is the gap which we should more look at in the region, which may be a hurdle for us to grow as an entrepreneurial ecosystem, such as the mindset of the people here has been traders. So they are not really looking into the risk of, they may talk a lot, but who will take this step? Or is it the education? Is it that a college like yours should be participating somehow in educating the region? Or is it the mindset that whenever people talk about building some solutions, they're thinking maybe locally, not thinking globally? What have you yet understood? Thanks.
So I'll take this question. We do a lot of work in the GCC countries. So your future leaders of tomorrow, they are sitting in the classroom nowadays, yeah? So the earlier you could do a change of mindset or influence them in terms of entrepreneurial thought and action. I'll give you an example. In Saudi Arabia this year, we just kicked off a year-long entrepreneurship program in 20 boys' school, 20 girls' school, and we did that in the Medina region, actually. And we also picked schools that were the most furthest away, not the rich schools, the schools that are not really looked after. So we've picked those schools. We had the blessing from Prince Saud himself, Prince Faisal in Medina, because I met with them and they said, what can we do for the future generation? We've got an issue just now with entrepreneurs. They all are working towards their 2030, 2035 vision. So I said to him, the best way to go about it, let's empower the youth now when they are at secondary school, because in most of the Middle Eastern countries, the things that people want to open is either a restaurant or a beauty salon. There's nothing wrong with that. But how many restaurants or beauty salons do you need? Will that drive economic growth? So you need to start getting people, the youth, through entrepreneurship. And hopefully when these high school kids, they go to university and they are, in the incubators of the university, they could come up with business ideas that will embrace the fourth industrial revolution, AI, technology, and so on. So I think what I've seen in the different parts, we're doing a lot of work in Kuwait, we're doing work in Saudi, UAE, Qatar as well, soon to be Oman and Bahrain as well. Yeah. Well, what I've seen, there's a lot of very good initiatives happening in Bahrain. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see this interconnectedness. It's a lot of siloed things that are being done. So we need to bring it together. Now, from my experience, there are two countries in the Middle East who are ready for ecosystem. One is the UAE, and second is Bahrain. Because what I've seen, you are far more advanced. Now, to do this ecosystem work that I showed you, the president of Colombia was talking, we need to bring the private sector, the public sector, the education establishment, the financial institution on the same platform to drive that ecosystem. And we had questions from regulators. Regulators will be part of the journey as well. But now, let's say you bring all these actors together. Do they speak the same language? I've heard everybody talk about ecosystem innovation. I bet if I was to ask people, define ecosystem, define innovation, if I've got 100 people here, we'll get 100 different answers. So you need to have a common base. You know, you all need to be understanding the same thing. Then you can go to ecosystem. The way we do it at Babson, you have to build champions. So if you get 2 people from the private sector, 2 people from the public sector, and so on, what we call the champions. We will basically take them through a fellowship program of 3 months or so, where they come to us, they spend time on the East Coast of the US to see the East Coast ecosystem. We basically train them, we give them the knowledge and everything else. We take them to Silicon Valley for 2 weeks or so, then they come back to the country, and each one of them, within the public sector, private sector, they'll work on one initiative that will form the future ecosystem. And that's the way we do it in many different countries. Maybe others can take this.
Well, one thing, I've only been here for a few days, right? And I've spent, as I mentioned, I've spent quite a time working in emerging markets and getting the opportunity to assess pretty quickly. And I would say there are remarkable strengths, and I've heard this conversation, I've had this question several times from Bahrainis, and I would look inward and understand what your strengths are, because for me, I actually think you're well poised, and you have unbelievable strengths to expand companies in the region globally, et cetera. And part is because you live in a particular constrained environment. It's contextual to a particular demographic. There's religion involved, etc. And so, like, I would flip what you think may be weakness or maybe things holding you back, and maybe look at them as particular strengths. So, there's a saying I have: hire for your weaknesses, because those are actually real strengths. And then how do I bring those strengths and like amplify them in a company, right? Or if I'm thinking about building for the future or building out in the world, how do I amplify this? Because that's my differentiator, right? And so I would love to talk to you more about this afterwards, because it's quite remarkable, the opportunity here. I think when you spend often, it's no different from staying in your own company. You're in your own Kool-Aid, versus having some outsider perspective, like maybe just tweak it a little bit, right? And inspire and re-engage the world in a different way.
Okay, I think we're coming to the time now that we have to call it a day, because we've got another session right after. I would like to thank you all for having made this session quite interactive, very nice questions you've asked. We all are going to be around if you want to talk to us afterwards, but I'd like to thank Professor Kim, Randall Ussery, and also Bill Ericsson for being here. I mean, they came all the way from America, so thank you to you as well for participating. Thank you.